Well, it's all for me, God. Johnny, Johnny, God. It's all gone into Mecca. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, good day, good evening, good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It is reading time. Gregor the Overlander. St. Patrick's Day. Got my green tie on. Got my kilt on. Perfect. Isn't it perfect? It's so good to be here with you. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for being present and accounted for. Let's get into this thing because it is in the moments of greatness where a guy like Gregor and a helmet with a light on it could potentially be he who bestoweth all these things that the prophecy of Gray promises the Underlanders. Oh my gosh. So they are on adventure. Boots, Vicus, something. What's his name? Mentor. I'll find it in a minute. Henry, Luxa. I think Sullivan is there, the queen, the warrior queen. And we were on our way into the darkness of the Underland with the bats. And Vicus was just about to help our Gregor figure out a little bit more about what this prophecy of Gray really talks about. So I'm going to go back a little bit because we started getting sucked in, and then I realized there's no way we're going to be able to make it all the way through this stuff. So we are at chapter 12 and a half. We are right somewhere in the midst of that, page 131, if you happen to have the same copy that I do. And Luxa kind of got a little bit gentle around him. Let's just remember that. Anyway, let's get into this. The prophecy of Gray, corrected Vicus. What if it puzzles you? The whole thing, thought Gregor. But he said, maybe we could just go through it a piece at a time. He studied the poem. Beware, Underlanders, time hangs by a thread. Well, that seems pretty clear. It was a warning. The hunters are hunted. White water runs red. He asked Vicus to unravel the second line. The rats are traditionally the hunters of the Underland, for they would happily track and kill the rest of us. Last night, we hunted them to save you, so the hunters were hunted. White water ran red when we left their bodies to the river. Oh, said Gregor. Something was bothering him, but he couldn't put his finger on it. The gnawers will strike to extinguish the rest. Are the gnawers the rats? He asked. Exactly so, said Vicus. The hope of the hopeless resides in a quest. The quest to get his dad. So he had escaped. The Underlanders had saved him, and now they were at war and off on the quest. Gregor suddenly knew what was bothering him. So this whole thing is my fault, he said. It never would have happened if I hadn't tried to escape. He thought of the approaching army of rats. What had he done? No, Gregor, put that from your mind, said Vicus firmly. You are but one player in a very long and difficult tale. The prophecy of Gray trapped you, as it trapped us long ago. Gregor was silent. He didn't exactly feel better at this point. Read on, said Vicus, and Gregor's head dropped to the page. The lights of regalia had faded away, and he had to squint to read by the faint torchlight as they flew. An overland warrior, a son of the sun, a son, S-O-N, of the sun, S-U-N. So a son, a child, boy child, of a son of the solar. May bring us back light. He may bring us back none. But gather your neighbors and follow his call, or rats will most surely devour us all. So you say this next part is about me, he said unhappily. Yeah, you are the overland warrior for obvious reasons, said Vicus, although Gregor didn't think the reasons were too obvious. You are a son of the sun. This is the sort of comedic wordplay Sandwich delighted in. Yeah, he was a funny guy, said Gregor glumly. Ha ha. Now, the lines that follow are most Gray, said Vicus. Sandwich could never clearly see if, in fact, you succeed in bringing back light, or if you fail. but he most adamantly insisted that we attempt the venture or die by the rat's teeth. Well, that's not too inspiring, said Gregor. The first time Sandwich had struck a chord with him, the possibility that Gregor might fail made the whole prophecy more plausible. What sort of light am I supposed to bring back? Asked Gregor. Is there a sacred torch or something? That is a metaphor. By light, Sandwich means life. If the rats can truly extinguish our light, they extinguish our life as well, said Vicus. A metaphor? Gregor thought an actual torch would be easier to bring back. How could he bring back some metaphor thing that he didn't really understand? That could be tricky. Tricky, he said. He read on. 2 over, 2 under, of royal descent. 2 flyers, 2 crawlers, 2 spinners ascent. What are all those 2s about? Asked Gregor. That tells us whom we must persuade to accompany us on the quest. We are proceeding as if the 2 over are you and your sister. 2 under of royal descent are Lux and Henry. Henry's sister, Nerissa, as you might have gleaned, was not a possible choice. Flyers are bats, crawlers are cockroaches, spinners are spiders. We now go to assemble our neighbors in the order that the prophecy dictates. First, the bats. The number of bats had been increasing as they flew. Henry led the party into a vast cave. Gregor gave a little jump when he realized the ceiling was bumpy with hundreds and hundreds of hanging bats. But don't we already have bats? Asked Gregor. We need official permission to take them on a quest, said Vicus. Also, there are matters of war to discuss. A towering cylinder of stone sat in the center of the cave. A towering cylinder of stone sat in the center of the cave. That is some pretty nice alliteration. Thanks, Suzanne Collins. Its sides were as slick as those of the palace. On the round, flat top, a group of bats waited. Vicus turned back to Gregor and whispered, We humans know you to be the warrior, but other creatures may have doubts. Whoever you think you may or may not be, it is essential that our neighbors believe you are the one. Gregor was trying to unwind that in his head when they landed next to the bats on the huge pillar of stone. The humans all dismounted. Deep bows and greetings followed on both sides. One particularly impressive silvery white bat appeared to be in charge. Queen Athena, Vicus said, and presented him. Meet you, Gregor, the Overlander. Be you the warrior? Be you he who calls? Asked the bat in a soft purr. Well, actually, Gregor saw Vicus frown and pulled up short. He'd been about to go into his spiel about how he wasn't the warrior, but then what? Vicus had whispered something about others believing he was the one. There was a war beginning. The bats weren't likely to send off valuable flyers on a wild goose chase. If he denied he was the warrior now, the quest would be called off, and his father would be as good as dead. That sealed it. Gregor stood up straight and tried to control the quaver that slipped into his voice. I am the warrior. I am he who calls. The bat was still for a moment, then nodded. It is he. She spoke with such certainty that for a second Gregor succeeded in thinking of himself as the warrior, a bold, brave, powerful warrior that Underlanders would tell stories about for centuries. He could almost see himself leading a squadron of bats into battle, stunning the rats, saving the Underland from Gigo, IP, announced Boots. And there he stood, a boy in a goofy hard hat with a beat-up flashlight and a bunch of batteries he hadn't even tested to see if they still had any juice. The mighty warrior excused himself and changed a diaper. Don't you love it? Have you noticed that? There's been all these times. Have you noticed the multiple times that Gregor has gone into some kind of daydream? He's just thinking of himself as a great hero. And then all of a sudden, from out back, I poo, I pee. Boots just kind of rocks him out of whatever that thought is and brings him right back to what has to happen, right? Change a diaper, right? I just think that's really funny. Chapter 13. You guys into this? Me too. Chapter 13. Vicus and Solivet arranged to have some sort of private war meeting with the bats. Do you need me to go along? Asked Gregor. It was less that he thought he could contribute to the meeting and more that he felt safer when Vicus was near. Being stranded on top of a tall pillar surrounded by hundreds of bats made him a little uncomfortable. And who would be in charge if anything came up? Luxa? That was no good. No, thank you, Gregor. We will be discussing battle positions for our forces, not the efforts of the quest. We shall not be absent long, said Vicus. No problem, said Gregor. But inside, he wasn't so sure. Before they left, Vicus's big gray bat murmured something in Lux's ear. She smiled, looked at Gregor, and nodded. Probably laughing at me, saying I'm a warrior, thought Gregor. But that was not it. Euripides says you're bruising his sides, says Luxa. He wants me to teach you how to ride. That bothered Gregor. He thought he'd been doing pretty well for a first-timer. What's he mean, I'm bruising his sides? You hold on too strongly with your legs. You must trust the bats. They will not drop you, said Luxa. It's the first lesson we teach the babies. Huh? Said Gregor. Luxa had a way of putting him down even when she wasn't trying. It's easier for the babies, said Merith quickly. Merith. That was the other name. Merith, Luxa, and Henry, right? Merith. He was like the helper guy, right? Like he was like the backup soldier dude. Merith held his fingers up before Boots, who was busy trying to tug off Gregor's sandal. 1, 2, 3. Like your sister. They have not yet learned much fear. We have a saying down here. Courage only counts when you can count. Can you count, Boots? 1, 2, 3. Boots grinned and held up her pudgy fingers in imitation. No, me. 1, 2, 3, 7, 10, she said, and lifted both hands in the air at her accomplishment. Henry scooped up Boots and held her at arm's length, the way someone might hold a wet puppy. Boots has no fear, nor will she when she masters counting. You like to fly, do you not, Boots? Go for a ride on the bat, he said mischievously. I ride, said Boots, and wiggled to get out of Henry's uncomfortable hold. Then ride you, said Henry, and tossed her right onto the side of the pillar. Gregor gasped as he saw Boots, as if in slow motion, sail out of Henry's hand and into the dark. Henry, said Merith in shock, but Luxa was cracking up. Gregor staggered to the side of the pillar and squinted into the darkness. The faint torchlight provided by the bats illuminated only a few yards. Had Henry really thrown Boots in and down to her death? He couldn't believe it. He couldn't. A happy squeal came from above his head. More! Boots. But what was she doing up there? Gregor fumbled with his flashlight. The beam was strong and cut a wide swath of light through the blackness. 20 bats were wheeling around the cave, playing some kind of game of catch with Boots. One would take her up high and flip her over, sending the toddler free-falling down to the ground. But long before she reached it, another bat would scoop her up gently, only to rise and flip her off again. Boots was giggling ecstatically. More, more, she ordered, and the bats each time she landed. And each time they dropped her, Gregor's stomach lurched up into his throat. Stop it, he snapped at the Underlanders. Henry and Luxa looked surprised. Either no one had ever yelled at those royal brats, or they hadn't seen Gregor lose his temper yet. He grabbed Henry by the front of the shirt. Bring her down now! Henry could probably cream him, but he didn't care in this moment. Henry put up his hands in mock surrender. Oh, take it easy, Overlander. She's not in danger, he said, grinning. In truth, Gregor, she is safer with the bats than in human hands, said Luxa. And she is not afraid. She's 2, screamed Gregor, wheeling on her. She's going to think she can jump off anything and be caught. She can, said Luxa, not seeing the problem. Not at home, Luxa. Not in the Overland. And Gregor, said Gregor, and I don't plan on staying in this creepy place forever. They may not have known exactly what he meant by creepy, but it was pretty clear it was an insult. Luxa raised her hand, and a bat coasted by, lightly flipping Boots into Gregor's arms. He caught her and squeezed her tightly. The Underlanders were no longer laughing. What means this creepy? Said Luxa coolly. Never mind, said Gregor. It's just something we Overlanders say when we see our baby sisters being tossed around by bats. See, for us, that's creepy. It was meant to be entertaining, said Henry. Oh yeah, you guys should open a theme park. You'll have a line stretched from here to the surface, said Gregor. Now they really had no idea what he was saying, but his tone was so sarcastic they couldn't miss it. Boots wriggled from his arms and ran toward the edge of the pillar. More, Gigo! More! She piped. No, Boots, no! No jump, said Gregor, catching her just in the nick of time. See, this is what I'm talking about, said Luxa, or he said to Luxa. He stuffed Boots into the pack and heaved her onto his back. The Underlanders were baffled by his anger and stung by his tone, even if they couldn't understand his words. Well, it was not Boots who needed the lessons anyway, said Luxa. It was you. Oh, abandon the thought, Luxa, Henry sneered. The Overlander would never give himself to the bats. Why? When he returns home, he may forget he's no longer in our creepy land and jump from his own roof. Luxa and Henry gave an unfriendly laugh. Meredith just looked embarrassed. Gregor knew it was a dare, and one part of him itched to take it. Just run, jump into the darkness, and leave the rest up to the bats. Another part of him didn't want to play this little game. Luxa and Henry wanted him to leap so that they could laugh at him flailing around in the air. He guessed both hated being ignored, though. He guessed they both hated being ignored, though. So he gave them a look of contempt and walked away. He could feel Luxa positively steaming behind him. I could have you thrown off the side, Overlander, and have no one to answer to, said Luxa. So do it, said Gregor, holding out his arms. He knew it was a lie. She'd have Vicus to answer to. Luxa bit her lip in vexation. Vexation. You ever feel vexed? Vexed. He got me. That's what she's doing. Burn. Oh, let the warrior be, Luxa, said Henry. He is no good to us dead yet, and even the bats may not be able to compensate for his clumsiness. Come, I will race you to the pitch pool. She hesitated for a moment, then ran for the edge. She and Henry launched into the air like a pair of beautiful birds and just vanished, presumably on their bats. Gregor stood there, hands on his hips, hating them. He had forgotten Meredith was behind him. You must not take what they say to heart, said Meredith softly. Gregor turned and saw the conflict on Meredith's face. They were both kinder as children. But when the rats took their parents, they changed. The rats killed Henry's parents too, said Gregor, some years before Luxa's. Henry's father was the king's younger brother. After the Overlanders, the rats would most like to see the royal family dead, said Meredith. When they were killed, Nerissa became as frail as glass. Henry as hard as stone. Gregor nodded. He could never hate people very long because he always ended up finding out something sad about them that he had to factor in. Like this kid at school, everybody hated because he was always pushing little kids around. And then one day they found out that his dad had hit him so much that he was in the hospital. Stuff like that, all Gregor could feel was bad. When Vicus arrived, a few minutes later, Gregor got onto his bat without a word. As they took off, he realized how tight his legs were clutched to the bat's sides and tried to loosen up a bit. Vicus rode with his legs swinging free. Gregor let his legs go and found it was actually easier to stay on, more balanced. Pause. Life lesson, right? Hold on too hard, you're going to lose it. He who holds on will lose. Do you remember us reading that? Me too. Don't hold on too hard, right? Look at this. Let go. Let the bats take care of it. It's okay. It's actually easier, more balanced. Relax. It's all good. Hakuna Matata, right? Now, we must visit the crawlers, said Vicus. Do you wish to continue dissecting the prophecy? Maybe later, Gregor answered. Vicus didn't press it. He probably had plenty on his mind with the war and all. Something else was eating at Gregor now that he had his temper under control. He knew he hadn't refused to jump off the pillar only to make Luxa and Henry mad. And it wasn't only because they'd laughed at him. No mystery why he'd mentioned theme parks, roller coasters, bungee jumps, parachute drops. He hated them. He went on them sometimes because everybody would think that he was a chicken if he didn't. But they weren't fun. What was fun about feeling the world drop out from under your feet? And those rides at least had seatbelts. Gregor hadn't jumped because deep down he was scared to. And everybody knew it. Pause for a second. It's taken us 147 pages to get to a point where Gregor, our main character, is actually being honest with himself. You notice how many times he's been protective in front of Luxa, how much he judges kind of how they act and what Henry is doing or what Meredith is doing or Vicus or feeling just protected, right? Don't get too close, don't get too close. But always on the underside, knew something was going on, right? And then he got this little bit of information from Meredith. And what was that? That these people used to be really nice, but their parents died. There was a reason for it. Just like the kid from school, right? Who's a bully out at the playground. You've seen it. You know what I'm talking about. Maybe not a bully physically, but maybe words. Maybe somebody who's making somebody feeling freaked out or something. He knows that feeling. He understands why somebody might act out. Maybe he understands why he puts up this wall. And then all of a sudden, because he admits that little piece to himself, it's like he's looking in the mirror, right? The simile stuff, but who am I? And then he's like, well, gosh, kind of understand why they're feeling that way. And then all of a sudden he goes, wait a second, what about me? Have I been doing that? Why didn't you jump off that? Because he was afraid. And we got this little sweet little note about how he doesn't like big rides. He doesn't like to be on those things, but he goes on them and he's terrified because he doesn't want to be seen as being afraid, a scaredy cat, different, unnormal, right? Look at me. I love being unnormal. I've just taken it as pride. I'm getting better at it. I've gotten some really good friends out there who are spot on. They know who they are. In 5th grade, got this friend Ella, just knows who she is. No doubt in my mind, when somebody says, you got to be doing something like this in order to be cool. You got to go on that ride at the theme park, and she'd be like, nah, not interested. And she could hold her own. Not me, man. I was I'd get right on that roller coaster. Not because I loved being on it, but because I loved being recognized as being somebody who was in that car. And we had so much fun. Oh my gosh, high five. Yeah, awesome. But I will say something, that also does feel good, right? So you got to balance it out. But he was scared. He's scared of heights. He's scared of falling. And they knew it. He knew it. And now he's just admitting it to himself. The cool thing is that we learn from when we finally realize moments like that, right? Chapter 14, got about 10 minutes. They flew through dark tunnels for hours. Gregor felt Boots' little head sink down on his shoulder, and he let her go. You couldn't let her nap too long during the day, or she'd wake up in the middle of the night wanting to play. But how could he keep her awake when it was dark and she couldn't move? He'd deal with it later. Don't forget that. It's probably going to happen tomorrow, but he'd deal with it later. She's sleeping right now. The gloom brought all Gregor's negative thoughts back. His dad imprisoned by rats, his mom crying, the dangers of taking Boots on this unknown voyage, and his own fear at the pillar. When he felt the bat coasting down for a landing, he was relieved at the distraction. Although he disliked meeting up with Luxa and Henry again, he was sure that they would be more smug and patronizing than ever. They dipped into a cavern that was so low the bat's wings brushed both the ceiling and the floor. When they landed, Gregor dismounted, but couldn't straighten up without bumping his hard hat. The place reminded him of a pancake, round and large and flat. He could see why the cockroaches might choose this. Bats couldn't fly well, and the humans and rats couldn't fit properly. And so, if there were only 4-foot-high ceilings, the bats had the control. He roused Boots, who seemed to enjoy her new surroundings. She toddled around, standing on tiptoe to touch the ceiling with her fingers. Everyone else just sat on the ground and waited. The bats hunched over, twitching at what Gregor supposed were sounds he couldn't even hear. A delegation of roaches appeared and bowed low. The humans got to their knees and bowed back, so Gregor did the same. Not one to stand on ceremony, Boots ran up with her arms extended in greeting. Bug! Big bug! She cried. A happy murmur ran through the group of roaches. Be she the princess? Be she? Be she the one? Tempt be she? Boots singled out one roach in particular and patted it between the antennae. Hi, you. Go right? We go right? Knows me? The princess knows me, said the roach in awe, and all the other roaches gave little gasps. Even the humans and bats exchanged looks of surprise. We go right? More right? Said Boots. Big bug, big Boots ride, she said, patting him more vigorously on the head. Gentle Boots, said Gregor, hurrying to catch her hand. He placed it softly on the bug's head. Be gentle, like with puppy dogs. Oh, gentle, said Boots, lightly bouncing her palm on the roach. It quivered with joy. Knows me, the princess knows me, the roach whispered. Recalls she the ride, does she? Gregor peered closely at the roach. Oh, are you the one who carried her to the stadium? He asked. The roach nodded in assent. I be Tempt, I be, he said. Now Gregor knew what all the fuss was about. To his eyes, Tempt looked exactly like the other 20 roaches sitting around. How on earth could Boots have picked him out of the crowd? Vicus looked him with raised eyebrows as if asking for an explanation. Asking and then the next for an explanation, and my eyes saw the word explanation, and so I was like, for explanation. I couldn't get that. Vicus looked at Gregor with raised eyebrows as if asking for an explanation, but Gregor could only shrug and reply. It was pretty weird. More ride, pleaded Boots. Tempt fell on his face reverently, and she climbed onto his back. For a moment, everyone just watched them pattering around the chamber. Then Vicus cleared his throat. Crawlers, we have grave matters to place before you. Take us to your king. Take us? The roach reluctantly tore themselves away from watching Boots and led Vicus and Solomon away. Oh, great, thought Gregor. Here we go again. He felt even less comfortable than when Vicus had left the first time. Who knew that what Henry and Luxa might do this time? And then there was the matter of the giant roaches. He didn't feel particularly safe in the bugs' land. Just yesterday, they had considered trading him and Boots to the rats. Well, at least there was Merith, who seemed decent enough, and the bats weren't too bad. Temp and one other roach named Tick had stayed behind. They completely ignored the rest of the party while they took turns giving the toddler rides. The 5 bats gathered together in a clump and fell asleep, exhausted from the day's flight. Merith placed the torches together to make a small fire and put on some food to warm. Henry and Luxa sat apart, speaking in low voices, which was fine with Gregor. Merith was the only one he felt like talking to anyway. So, can you tell the crawlers apart, Merith? Asked Gregor. He dumped all his batteries on the ground to sort out the dead ones while they talked. No, it's most rare that your sister can. Among us are few that can make distinctions. Vicus is better than most, but to pick one from so many, it's passing strange, said Merith. Perhaps it's a gift of the Overlanders, he suggested. No, they look identical to me, said Gregor. Boots was really good at those games where they gave you 4 pictures that looked alike, except one had a tiny little difference. Like there were 4 party hats, and one had 7 stripes instead of 6, and they were all drinking from paper cups. She always knew whose was whose, even when they got mixed up on the table together. Maybe every roach really did look distinctly different to Boots. Gregor opened up the flashlight. It took 2 D-sized batteries. He swapped the other batteries in and out, trying to determine which ones still had any power. As he worked, he inadvertently flipped the switch on when the flashlight was pointed at Luxa and Henry. They jumped, unaccustomed to sudden bursts of light. He did it a couple more times on purpose, which was childish, but he liked seeing them flinch. They'd last about 5 seconds in New York City, he thought. That made him feel a little better. Of the 10 batteries, all but 2 still had juice. Gregor opened up the compartment on his hat and found it ran on some special rectangular battery. Not having any replacements, he would have to use it sparingly. Maybe I should save this for last. If I lose the others, or they go dead, I'll still have this on my head, he thought. He clicked off the light on the bat. Gregor put the good batteries back in his pocket and set the other two aside. These two are duds, he said to Merith. They don't work. Shall I burn them? Asked Merith, reaching for the batteries. Gregor caught his wrist before he could toss them into the flames. No, those might explode. He didn't really know what would happen if you put a battery in the fire, but he had a vague memory of his dad saying something about that it was dangerous to do. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught Luxa and Henry exchanging uneasy glances. You could blind yourself, he added, just for effect. Well, that might happen if they exploded. Merith nodded and gingerly set the dead batteries back. By Gregor. He rolled them around with his sandal, making Luxa and Henry nervous. But when he saw that Merith looked nervous too, he stuck the duds in his pocket. Vicus and Sullivan returned just as the food was ready. They looked worried. Everyone gathered around as Merith passed out fish, bread, and something that reminded Gregor of sweet potato, but wasn't. Boots! Dinner time! Said Gregor, and she ran over. When she realized that they weren't following, she turned her head and waved impatiently to the roaches. Temp! Tika! Dina! An awkward social moment. No one else had thought to invite the roaches. Merith had not prepared enough food. Clearly, it wasn't standard to dine with roaches. Fortunately, they shook their heads. No, princess, we eat not now. They started to scurry away. Stay, dear, said Boots, pointing at Temp and Tick. You stay here, big bug. And the roaches obediently sat down. Boots, said Gregor, embarrassed. You don't have to stay. She orders everyone around, he told the roaches. It's just she wants to keep playing with you, but she has to eat first. We will sit. We will wait, said one stiffly, and Gregor had the feeling the bug wanted him to mind his own business. Everyone ate hungrily except Vicus, who seemed distracted. So when leave we? Asked Henry through a mouthful of fish. Oh, sorry. So when leave we? Asked Henry through a mouthful of fish. We do not, said Sullivan. The crawlers have refused to come. Lux's head snapped up indignantly. Refused? On what grounds? They do not wish to invite the anger of King Gorger by joining our quest, said Vicus. They have peace with both humans and rats now. They do not want to unease that. Don't want to unease that. You know what? I think that this is right where we would sit. They're having dinner. They're having a conversation. We know at this point that the cockroaches are not interested in joining their adventure. They do have peace with the two groups, so why would you all of a sudden decide to go against one, right? You're going to have some reason. You're going to have some purpose, right? It's interesting how Boots can recognize different cockroaches, right? Do you have those friends who are able to remember faces better than you, or remember names more than you, or can remember numbers faster than you, or that you can do something that they can't, that you're just a little bit better at? So the thing that I really like about this is that Gregor is noticing a strength in Boots, right? There's something strong in her personality. And obviously one of the big groups, the roaches, are really enamored by Boots, really enamored. And she has this ability to connect with them in a way that others don't. So that probably is going to happen in the future. At least that's what my brain's thinking. Any other thoughts? Anything else that you guys want to share? No? I think it's so cool. Anyway, thank you for reading. Thank you for being here today. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope that you will call upon family members and just wish them a happy St. Patrick's Day. And say, Mr. O just told me to do that. If they're not wearing green, it really isn't that big of a deal of pinching somebody, although it's kind of fun to pinch somebody. It can make people feel pretty grumpy. Other than that, listen, with the luck of the Irish, with a four-leaf clover, may the road rise to meet you. I hope everything in your life goes splendidly well. And until the next time that we have the joy of reading together, I want to say, I love you. Happy Thanksgiving, and get out of here. Happy Thanksgiving, Meg. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Love you. Very grateful for you.